Hello everyone. The next topic of your syllabus is elements of crime. As you know, there are various elements has been given in the various book, but basically under the criminal law there are two elements of crime. Number one, actus reus, and number two, the mens rea. These are the only two elements of crime, whereas in some books you will find a human being as an element. As you know, for punishment under IPC or under the criminal law, the person must be a human being. An animal or a mad or any other insect cannot be punished under the Indian Penal Code. So, considering a human being an element of crime is something which is erroneous. So, therefore, for elements of crime, there are basically two elements. Number one, the actus reus, or we call it guilty act, and the mens rea, and we also call it the guilty mind. There is a landmark or fundamental principles of element of crime is, and that is a Latin maxim, actus non facit reum nisi mens sit rea. That means act alone cannot be culpable unless it was accompanied by guilty mind. What does it mean? If a person committing an act, then it shall not be punishable. If a person is committing an act and that is a wrongful act, then still it is not punishable unless act was done with the guilty mind. So what does it mean? What we understood, that for the punishment of a criminal there must be guilty act as well as there must be a guilty mind. If there is only guilty act alone, I already told you in our previous lecture that if there is only guilty act and there is no guilty mind, then the accused cannot be punished so far. So actus reus and guilty mind both must simultaneously exist. So that suggest guilty act, they suggest the guilty act, basically it is the external or physical elements of crime. Why it is called external element? Because the guilty act is not available inside of human being, rather it has been done by the physical force, by external force. It has been done by the hands of the person, it has been done by the external source, and thereby it is called the external element of crime or the physical element of crime, and therefore we technically call it actus reus. In Latin we call it actus reus, whereas the guilty mind is internal element of crime, or we also call it mental element of crime, and technically we call it mens rea. So to constitute a crime, guilty act and guilty mind, or actus reus and mens rea both must coexist, then only we can call it the offense. Otherwise, an act done by the individual without guilty mind cannot be called as an offense. You must keep in mind that act alone cannot be culpable unless it is accompanied by guilty mind. So basically what we understood, that actus reus plus mens rea is equal to an offense. The principle is actus reus and mens rea both must coexist. If both are not simultaneously existing, then there cannot be a crime. What does it mean? Actus reus alone is not punishable. Mens rea alone is again not punishable. Actus reus is not equal to crime, mens rea is not equal to crime or offense. Rather, actus reus and mens rea is actus reus plus mens rea is equal to an offense. Then only the person would be punishable. Now you would ask a question, then what are the examples of actus reus alone and what are the examples of mens rea alone and which is not constituted as crime? For example, someone going over the road, and if he hits someone by accident, then it is an act without the element of mens rea, and therefore the act alone cannot constitute an offense, and therefore the person cannot be punished for such offense. Point number two, mens rea alone is not an offense. How? Suppose you are sitting in your room and thinking that in the morning I will kill my enemy. So by thinking these in your mind, by imagination, ipso facto, it is not punishable. It is not punishable by itself. Rather, you must do something towards the commission of the crime, and thereby it would be converted into the attempt to commit an offense, because the offense has not been succeeded. So by thinking such things in your mind is not punishable alone, so therefore mens rea alone is not punishable. Rather, actus reus and mens rea both must coexist. Let me give you an example. A beats his wife B, and to temper with the evidences, what he thinks that while beating C became unconscious, and thereby he thought that C is now dead. And to temper with the evidences, to remove the evidences, what he did, he throws her into the river, and she died. After postmortem report, it was came into knowledge, it was came to the knowledge of the court that she died due to drowning and not by beating. So let us extract the exact element of actus reus and the mens rea, when the actus reus was present and when the mens rea was present in this particular example. So when he was beating, no actus reus was present. Now you would ask that he was beating, then how actus reus was not present? Listen carefully, that when he was beating, there was no actus reus for the killing of the women, because there was actus reus for becoming unconscious. Of course, there was an actus reus, there was an act of an offense, but that act of an offense for the making her unconscious stays, but it was not sufficient to kill her. So therefore there was no element of actus reus for killing her. So when he was beating, there was no actus reus, that means the actus reus was not present. But he thought that she is dead. What does it mean? At that time, at that point of time, the mens rea was available, the guilty mind was available. That means when he was beating her, no actus reus was present, but mens rea was present, and for mens rea alone, he cannot be punished for the offense of killing her. But for the removing the evidences, for removing the evidences, what he did, he throws her into the river. So at that point of time, throwing her into the river, at that point of time, the actus reus was present, because for that particular due to that particular act she died. So she was died just because of reason of drowning. So when he throws her into the river, at that point of time, the actus reus was present, but there was no guilty mind. Of course, the guilty mind for the removing of evidences was were present, but for killing her was not present. The guilty mind for killing her, the guilty mind for making her dead is not present. Rather, the guilty mind for the removing the evidences were present, and therefore at that point of time the actus reus was present, but there was no mens rea. So in this particular case, the person cannot be held liable for the offense of causing death of his wife. Hope you have understood that for removing the evidences, he cannot be punished for the offense of causing death of his wife, or for beating his wife when she became unconscious, he cannot be punished for the offense of causing death of his wife. So actus reus alone cannot be punishable, mens rea alone cannot be punishable. Of course, he can be punished for the different offenses, but for not causing death of his wife. Hope you might have understood. The point is what we called actus reus. Here, actus is basically an act done by an individual. Reus, we called it culpable. Culpable means the punishable, an act which is punishable in itself. An act done by the individual which is punishable is called actus reus. For example, someone is causing an offense, or someone committing an offense of theft, someone is committing an offense of dacoity or rape or robbery or murder. These are the actus reus because it is a wrongful act, it is a wrong act in the eye of law, in the eye of the society, and therefore it is a culpable act, and ultimately we call it is a punishable act. Again, the point is what we called in mens rea. Mens is basically the mind, the mental element, the intellect of the human being, that is called mens. Rea is again is that means culpable or the punishable, and we technically call it the guilty mind. Mens rea is also called as the guilty mind. So, as we already understood, for punishing an individual, culpable act and culpable mind or the guilty mind both must coexist. Then only there can be an offense. Then only the accused can be prosecuted and punished by the court of law. Otherwise, he cannot be punished. Now, the problem is what we called act. How you would say that this is an act and it is a guilty act, it is not a normal act. So for which you must study section 33 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, which defines the term act and omission. So acts and omission both are same in the sense that both are punishable. Even an omission is amount to an act, and an act is amount to an omission. So conversely or vice versa, it is true. For example, the jailer is having duty to provide food to the prisoners, but he is not providing food. That means he is omitting his duty, and that is omission of his duty, and therefore that omission is amount to an act. And the prisoner, suppose the prisoner died due to starvation, then in such a situation the jailer of that prison shall be punished for the offense of causing death of the prisoner. So act and omission both are equal in the eye of law. Now come to the point what we called act. So basically when we divide the act, then it can be divided into two parts, the noun, the verb. Now what we call noun, you know already, no need to go into detail. So here when act is considered to be a noun, then in such a situation, for example, the act means the parliamentary act, for example Information Technology Act, Indian Contract Act, Partnership Act, Sales of Goods Act, Copyright Act, Patent Act, and there are various environmental acts. So you can cite any example when you are citing act as noun. So why it is called noun and why it is called an act? Since when the parliament is passing a law, then basically it is an act. It was a work of the parliament, and therefore it is called an act because it's a highest lawmaking body in the country. But we are not considering here when act is considered to be a noun, rather we are focusing over when act is considered to be a verb, because in our IPC in criminal law, we are considering act as verb and not act as noun. But you must know that what when act is noun and when act is verb. So here, when act is working as a verb, then that means an action. You are knowing what we call verb. So like eating, singing, acting, walking, these all are verbs. So come to the point, when there is an action, then definitely there would be a muscular movement. Of course, when most of you or some of you might have gone or seen the gym, or some of you might have regularly going to the gym. So if there is muscular movement, then definitely there will be contraction and expansion of the muscles. There would be contraction or expansion of muscles, that is called muscular movement. What does it mean? If I am just picking the glass, I am picking the duster, or I am writing over the whiteboard or the blackboard, then definitely there is contraction or expansion of the muscular movement, and that movement is called an act. Again, the point is that muscular movement may be willed muscular movement or unwilled muscular movement. Again, a question may come in your mind that what is willed muscular movement and what is unwilled muscular movement. The willed muscular movement are those movements when there is a command from the brain, from our brain is saying that to pick the glass, to pick the duster, or to pick the uh, copy, or to open the laptop. So basically there is a command from our brain to do something, and therefore it is called a willed muscular movement or the voluntary act. We also called it a voluntary act. But if suppose someone asking us to do and we are not intended to do, I'm not willing to do, but if someone is forcing me to pick the glass, to write something over the whiteboard, or to do something which I'm not willing, so that muscular movement is called unwilled muscular movement or involuntary act in the eyes of law. Now the question is, which muscular movement is punishable? So the muscular movement which is willed muscular movement, or the act which is a voluntary act done by the person, is punishable. Voluntary act done by the person is punishable, but involuntary act, if someone forcing me to do a particular crime except murder, is not punishable, because at that point of time I was under threat of someone. He threatened me to do something, and therefore it was not my act, rather it was someone else's act. You will study under the general exception. The act done against my will is not my act. The act done against my will is not mine act, rather it was an act done by someone else, and therefore someone else act I shall not be responsible, I shall not be make held liable. So therefore an act which is voluntary act shall be punishable, and an act which is involuntary act should not be punishable. Hope you might have understood that what we call the act. Now come to the point or the principle. When actus reus, or the act followed by mens rea, then in such a situation there is no conviction, it is wrong. And when mens rea followed by actus reus is true, and there is conviction. I know you didn't understood what does it mean. Let me explain that actus reus followed by mens rea. What does it mean? The act already done on the part of the accused, and thereafter mens rea came into existence. How? How it is possible? Suppose someone is going over the road, and if he hits someone by accident, of course there was actus reus and there was no mens rea, because there was no mental element of crime. He was not intended to kill, but by accident he hit someone and thereby the person died. So when he thought that it's good that he is dead now because he was my enemy. So what does it mean? Actus reus come first and mens rea came later. Actus reus came first and mens rea came later. The actus reus was followed by the mens rea. In such a situation, the person cannot be convicted for the offense of causing death because there was no mental element, there was no mens rea, and therefore the person shall not be punished for the offense of causing death of the individual because the actus reus come first and mens rea came later. But convert the case, just reverse the case. Conversely, it is not so. Vice versa, it is not so. When mens rea is followed by an act, then it is true and there would be conviction. What does it mean? Mental element came into his mind first. He decided to kill someone, he wanted to kill someone, he intended to kill someone, and thereby he is running his car at the speed of 80 kilometer per hour or 100 kilometer per hour, and thereby he hits someone. So what does it mean? Mens rea came first and thereafter he kills someone. So mental element came first and thereby he hits, and definitely there would be conviction. Definitely there would be conviction. So when actus reus followed by mens rea, there would be no conviction, and when mens rea followed by actus reus, there would be conviction. In every act, there may be consequence or there may be conduct. Or you can say there would be conduct and finally there would be consequence. But every act may not result into culpability. What does it mean? Every act is not punishable. There are certain crimes where consequence is not important, only conduct is important. What does it mean? Definitely, if someone is doing certain act, then consequence may ensue or consequence may not ensue. For example, if someone is going to kill someone, he may kill him or may not kill him due to some technical error. In such a situation, there was conduct. Conduct was available, but the consequence was not available. But there are certain crime when conduct is important, no need of consequence. Even the conduct is punishable. Let me give you an example. Giving false statement before the court of law is punishable under section 191 of IPC. What does it mean? In this situation, the conduct is important. There is no need of consequence. What does it mean? That means even on his statement, whether the person is punished by the court of law or not, it doesn't matter, it is immaterial. Simply giving false statement before the court of law is punishable. Simply giving false statement before the court of law is punishable, and that is called perjury. That is an offense of perjury, punishable under section 191 of IPC. Conversely, there are certain acts where conduct is not important, rather, the consequence is important for the purpose of punishment, for the purpose of crime. For example, suppose there is a child who wanted to round up a stone by tightening it with a rope. So, in this situation, it is very much danger to the society, but conduct itself is not punishable unless consequence occur, unless consequence ensued. Because unless the stone hits someone, it is not punishable. When the stone hits someone, then only it is punishable. So, in case of conduct, there is no need of consequence. Rather, only on the conduct, only on the basis of conduct, the person would be punished. And in case of perjury, so in case of consequence, we will further extend our lecture through the consequence. So, in case of consequence, if it is a case of consequence, then there must be cause and effect. In case of consequence, there would be some cause and there would be some effect. So, if it is a case of consequence, then definitely there would be cause and effect. Now, the question is, what is cause and what is effect? Let me give you an example. Suppose A blow B, or A hits B by his fist on his chest. In that situation, blowing is a cause and B died, it is an effect. So if A blow B and B died, then it is an effect. Or let me give you another example, that if A is giving B arsenic oxide, Ar2O3 arsenic oxide, and as a result B died. So there was cause is giving arsenic oxide to B and the B died, there is effect. It is a consequence. If it is a case of consequence, then definitely there is a cause and there is effect. So there someone is going to do something, that is cause, and if it is resulted into some result, then that is a effect of that cause. So basically cause and effect, or the effect may be of three types: direct, remote, and proximate. There are three types of cause and effect. There is direct cause and effect, there is remote cause and effect, and there is proximate cause and effect. What does it mean? Let me give you an example again. Suppose A shots B and the B died immediately. This is the direct effect. This is the direct effect of the cause, and the cause was A shots B and the B died immediately, so that is a direct cause and effect. Point number two, remote cause and effect. Suppose A opened fire over B and the B died after 10 years. The B died after 10 years. This is remote cause and effect, and in such a situation the person may not be held responsible, or even it would be appropriate to say A shall not be responsible for the offense of causing death of B, because the result ensued after 10 years, and therefore there is no relation between cause and effect. So if there is a case of consequence, then a relation between cause and effect has to be established. In first example, the direct cause and effect, there is a relation because A shot B and the B died immediately. But in case of remote cause and effect, he might be died by some other cause. He may not be died by something happened 10 years ago. And the point number 3, the proximate cause and the effect. For example, A opened fire at B and the B died after 10 days, the B died after 7 days. In such a situation, the person may or may not be responsible. If there is a relation, if the relation is established between cause and effect, then he shall be responsible. For example, he opened fire over B and he was in the ventilator up to 5 months or 3 months. Then in such a situation, it is a proximate cause and effect, and we can say there is a relation between the death of the individual and the illness of the victim. So the relation has been established. Even he was on the ventilator for 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, or even 5 months, but still there is relationship had been established, and the person would be responsible for the offense of causing death of B. Let me give you another example. Suppose A stabbed B. A stabbed on 1st of August 2020, and he died on 1st of September 2021. Then here A shall be held liable for the causing death, because a reasonable man can foresee the consequence. A reasonable man, because in case of remote cause and effect, a reasonable man test would be applied, that whether reasonable man can foresee the effect of his act or not. Let me give you another example of direct cause. Suppose A is having a girlfriend called B, and she is having fetus in her womb, and A inflicted injury to B, and thereby the child died within 5 minutes after the birth. So here A is responsible or held liable for the offense of causing death of the child because he inflicted injury and the child died within 5 minutes after the birth, and therefore A shall be responsible for the offense of causing death of the child. Hope you might have understood that what is called direct cause and effect, what is called remote cause and effect, and what is called proximate cause and effect. Thank you very much.